Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Saturday, May 31st, 2025. Last day of May. We're 6 months into 2025 already. This year is just slipping through our fingers. It's going so fast, I think. Anyway, steel tariffs double. Donald Trump makes that announcement yesterday, and that happens very, very shortly, apparently in 4 days or 3 days now. 800,000 new Canadians in 2025 already. We'll talk about the invasion ongoing here in Canada and the United Kingdom as well. Elizabeth May goes warp 10 on climate change, so her and Tom Paris are going to turn into lizard things or something. I'm just kidding. But she does submit a petition to the House of Commons that is talking about how climate change is the worst thing ever, and so on and so forth. Typical Elizabeth May stuff. I don't know how anyone can still believe that tripe. Really, it's honestly, it's beyond words how ridiculous it all sounds. Now, Spencer, the guy who was going around to Mark Carney's thing, and he's got a YouTube channel. You'll recognize him when we see him. He's got a whole bunch of stories from Canadians across the country talking about how rigged the election is, and like the most recent election was. And so I thought that was interesting. We'll watch a couple of those stories. Very, very interesting stuff going on there. Trump wants cars made in America. Does Canada count still, or no? Is the USMCA null and void again? I'm not sure. Over the next year, the whole thing he wants built in America, he says. France is going to ban smoking. And I have a theory that the powers that be look at us and decide they like X thing, whatever it is, and then they figure out ways to take it away from us. And they took away smoking from North America in the early 2000s, right? Well, excuse me. They took away smoking from Canada in the early 2000s. I was at Dollywood recently, and they had smoking benches. So I was like, oh, there's this bench over here behind a bush that nobody's using. So we went and sat down there for a minute. And not very long after, a couple of people came out of a store and they lit up a cigarette and they sat down on the bench. And there was a little sign that I hadn't noticed before that said, "This is a smoker's bench. Please smoke here." And I was like, holy cow. And there were people like just smoking out and about. So it's a very, very strange. We haven't experienced in Canada's Wonderland. You have to leave the park if you want to smoke. I don't know if you can actually smoke cigarettes in Canada's Wonderland. Let me know. I don't know. I can't remember. It's been a couple of years since I've been there, but I was shocked. And it was something that was more accepted there. Anyway, regardless of all of that, I thought it was very, very interesting. And France is banning smoking, just like Canada did, and they're using. It's a incremental thing, the same way they brought it in here. It's just a little bit until the younger generation gets acclimatized to it, and then big fines and all the rest. And it's interesting. Warning labels are going on marijuana, and that's interesting. 7 years after making marijuana legal, apparently it causes psychosis. It's interesting. There's all sorts of strange things coming out about all that. And Elon Musk is leaving his position at Doge, and he's staying on as an advisor. Amazing Polly's got some information for us on that, and a whole bunch of other stuff with regards to Elon Musk. He's got a new black eye. Interesting timing, right? Last day of working in the White House, last day of working as a government Doge employee, last day of all that stuff, has a big meeting with Donald Trump, has a black eye. I'm sure it's nothing. I'm sure just a crazy coincidence, right? Absolutely nothing to concern ourselves with. We'll just carry on. Anyway, so lots to get to. Oh, I already said that. Let's get started. Julius, I think we have to talk about what's going on with regards to everywhere in North America seeming to have, if not rigged elections, a judicial coup. And in the case of the United States, regardless of whether you like Trump or you don't like Trump, or you think he's the good guy or the bad guy, it seems like whoever was in charge of the United States really desperately doesn't want Donald Trump to continue to be in charge of the United States or have his policies adopted long term. So maybe it's a very powerful faction, who knows, but they appear to be doing everything they can to stop Trump from getting all of his policy passed and or passed through Congress or anything like that. He can do lots within executive orders, and he does, but the second step of that was supposed to be getting it enshrined in law, passing it through Congress and the Senate, and it's not happening because the Republican-controlled Senate isn't passing things, as far as I understand it, and the House isn't either, except for a few choice things here and there to I don't know, placate their base or something to that effect. And so with that going on, Trump is effectively nullified. And then in Canada, you can't I mean, the PPC is effectively nullified. In the United Kingdom, Nigel Farage seems to be surging, but it's an interesting situation because I think he signed a deal. Like, he was not surging, and then all of a sudden everything kind of changed, and now Farage is basically a PM in waiting, and it's a very, very, I don't know what's going on there, but it feels like very coordinated to me. I know there are people out there who say it's not coordinated. That's fine. I agree to a degree. I think that there are people a couple of steps back who maybe are taking care of themselves, but also have a lot of influence through companies they own, through people they know, things like that, people they put in positions of power through funding their campaigns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so this web of people who have power across the West and fund campaigns and fund vaccine initiatives, Bill Gates, George Soros, these types of people, I think they exist. George Soros really did influence the pound and destroyed it to a degree in the 60s, 70s, and so it's well documented. And so I look at what's happening now, and I don't necessarily think that there is one entity that's doing this, but I think that multiple entities are doing this, and I think it's on purpose, and I think it's coordinated to a degree, so long as you get yours and I get mine, kind of like a mafia, you know what I mean? Like, you get your territory to deal with all the fentanyl and all this and all the spoils there, and I get my territory, and we're not going to mix, because if we mix, there's going to be a war. So I feel like there is war going on, and the war is between the owned representatives of that entity, whatever that entity is. It's a mafia, it's a whatever it is, right? And us, because we're in the way of total power. And also they need us to continue to produce. So there are strange things going on in that we're getting policy changes, we're getting placated, we're getting kind of lip service, but at the same time, we're having our countries invaded, flooded with migrants, tax dollars stolen, sent to Ukraine, so on and so forth. So there's this weird push and pull where you can make a case that they don't work for us. Look at all the tax money going to Ukraine, but at the same time, they're giving tax dollars to help bring down housing costs and blah, blah, blah. So I think there's a war. We're going to start there. Here's Julius, and he says, globalists or terrorists, he says, immigration and debt creation are their primary weapons. And I think that that's true. And here's an example from England. Center for Migration Control is sharing the Telegraph's article. Foreign nationals are claiming £1 billion, a month in benefits. We must scrap indefinite leave to remain and end this madness. We don't have media honest enough to report on this. And so it's this bad in Canada too. Have you been to Niagara Falls recently? And we just don't know about it. Nobody's talking about it. But in England, they've got actual media sometimes, but not really. I feel like it's another phase of being played. It's another phase of the operation, but I don't know what the play is yet. Bill says federal government in Canada spending, the total federal payroll costs climbing from $36.8 billion in 2015 to $63.1 billion in 2024. That's a 62% increase, he says. This includes salaries, benefits, and pension contributions. Since Justin Trudeau got elected, government employment at all levels of government went from 3.6 million to 4.4 million employees. Meanwhile, most governments have a ban on hiring white Canadians. Yeah, that's true too, right? So that's a very interesting situation that's going on. So they use debt, they use migration, they use immigration, they use government-created jobs for very specific people. They use all of these tools, and you could ignore it until you start to look at it. And when I start to look at it, I think to myself, holy cow, this seems coordinated. They're all using the same language. They're all doing similar things. They're all using the apparatus of the state to bring in invaders and fund them in hotels. How does that happen by accident? It doesn't happen by accident, I don't think. Here's Elizabeth May using the climate change lie that is being used by King Charles, that's being used across the EU by Ursula von der Leyen and all the rest. She goes really, really... At the end, here she's apologizing to Manitoba, saying, I don't want to use your fires as political rhetoric. I want to support you, basically. Climate change is real. And it's just, I don't know. It's something that sticks out to me. But here's Elizabeth May. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Here's Elizabeth May talking about climate change in Manitoba and wildfires.
Challenge will be to have emissions every year, close quote. Again, To Premier Wob Canoe and everyone in Manitoba, I'm thinking of you. I am not using the forest fires of Manitoba for rhetorical flourish.
She is using the forest fires of Manitoba for rhetorical flourish.
We are in a climate emergency. We've seen fires ravage British Columbia.
Arson.
Every province in Canada.
Arson.
Had fires through the month of May 2023.
Arson.
It's already claimed lives in Manitoba this year. The climate crisis is a world on fire. The climate crisis is not a subject, it's not a file, it's not an issue. It's a current emergency.
It is a distraction. It is a hoax being used to steal our money. That's what it is. Here's Elizabeth May introducing her petition, and Mark says, "Holy cow," or "Holy poop." Whoever voted for Elizabeth May, clown world. No, we don't. Our elections are rigged. Up and down, they're rigged, totally. She's out here saying Canada needs to radically cut emissions. She was saying we have to halve emissions every year. Cut them in half, right? No, I don't think so. Meanwhile, China, India, and others are emitting more than ever, building coal plants, etc. These radicals aren't saving the world. They're destroying Canada. They're destroying the West's ability to be productive and compete. And that's very important. That's an attack against our ability to compete is an attack on our standard of living. It's an attack on us. And we're not even responding at all. Here's Juno News, and they're talking about Hudson Bay. HBC will permanently close all of its stores by June 1st and terminate more than 8,000 employees. How many malls did Hudson Bay anchor, right? That's a lot of rent not being paid as of June 1st. How many malls are going to disintegrate, right? And I've been talking about how many malls, anchor stores have been kind of evaporating and leaving and stuff. The mall in Guelph is still kind of busy, but there are more and more stores every time I go that are closing. And I mean, Hudson Bay HBC isn't in Stone Road Mall, but it is part of the economic attack to shut these down. Now, some of these are money laundering operations, I've been told, but that's not surprising at all either. So like some of the mall stores were money laundering operations, but that's another story. The Great Translation says Yarong Luan Jiang is the first Chinese female graduate to deliver the commencement address at Harvard University. In return, she used the speech to promote community with a shared future for mankind, a Xi Jinping propaganda term. Allowing this as part of free speech turns educational institutions like Harvard into CCP powerhouse. So interesting. Xi Jinping is being promoted at the commencement address in Harvard, at Harvard. So, and Found in Translation says, how about the owner of a $1 billion plaza in Vancouver promoting community with a shared future for mankind in his speech when accepting an honorary doctorate degree from a prestigious Canadian university? So same thing, same propaganda, very, very concerning. And this is communists using their weapons of their preferred weapons. And communist globalists, not sure, who knows. And this guy says Mark Carney's brother works for King Charles, a royally suppressed conflict of interest. It's not theory or rumor, it's a fact. Sean Carney, Mark Carney's brother, is chief operating officer at Kensington Palace. Sean Carney operates at the very heart of the royal household alongside Prince William, future king of the United Kingdom. While Mark Carney builds his statesman-like stature in Canada, his own brother manages the household of the heir to the British throne. I talk a lot about how pieces are moved on the board, and some pieces have a lot of influence and can move diagonally, like a queen moves on a chessboard or a bishop, right? Mark Carney is very unilateral. He can do a lot of things as the former Bank of England, former Bank of Canada, and now Prime Minister of Canada. He can do a lot of different things. But there are other pieces on the board who can do other things that maybe somebody in such a public position like Mark Carney can't do. And it would be really nice if those people could have meetings that looked above board and had, ethics shields and all sorts of other things like that. And another good example is Maxwell has sisters. Ghislaine Maxwell has sisters who are connected with very, very prominent, I can't remember their connections. BlackRock? No. I'll have to think about it. I can't remember the connections right now. I apologize. But Maxwell has sisters who are connected to other very important things. And this is kind of a trope at this point in time, but this is a strategy that's used by these people to maintain power and communications and say it's innocent. We're brothers. We're husband and wife. We're this and that. And so it's very, very interesting how powerful Mark Carney is, and his brothers too, right? So here is carrying on. Sean Connery operates at the very heart. While Mark Carney builds a statesman-like stature in Canada, his own brother manages the household of the heir to the British throne. Coincidence? Absolutely not. Mark Carney, the current Prime Minister of Canada and former Governor of the Bank of England, has a brother named Sean Carney. Sean Carney serves as the Chief Operating Officer of the household of Their Royal Highness the Prince and Princess of Wales, overseeing operations at Kensington Palace, the official residence of Prince William and Princess Catherine. It's weird that this didn't come out at all during the election. Nobody mentioned it, right? Nobody mentioned it at all. Super duper absent. Weird, right? Very, very strange. And so I think as pieces on the chessboard, they work together to achieve their goal. And the goal is to overwhelm the king or to take the king and the opposing king. And we're being played, right? Honestly. White Rabbit says the UK recently introduced a capital gains tax. Predictably, the country is now experiencing wealth flight. So again, this is on the theme of the weapons they use are immigration and debt. And so they're going to tax the farms into receivership. And so people who can get out are getting out. And so what's happening is, well, the recent capital gains tax increase in the United Kingdom was expected to bring additional tax revenue. Instead, high net worth individuals and families are leaving the country, leading to a 10% fall in net capital gains tax revenue. Yeah, yep. And that's, predictable isn't quite a part of it, but if you do have means to get out, people do get out. And there are a lot of people leaving Canada right now. I'm idly shopping for jobs in Ohio and South Dakota, thanks to some people suggesting Tennessee might be a little humid and there are better places with a better population mix. And so it's interesting to look around at the jobs. It's interesting to look around at the communities around there. And like standing in front of the train that is out of control with your hands out saying, I'll save you, everybody. Holy cow, right? Like at this point in time, things look pretty dire in Canada, honestly. And I've said this for a while, and I don't know what the escape hatch is, right? Here's Maxime Bernier talking about the invasion. And he says, we're being replaced by the third world. Quote, the average Canadian immigrant has now become younger, lower skilled, and more likely to hail from poorer regions such as India, Sub-Saharan Africa, or the Middle East, Bank of Canada study. So Canada's increasingly dependency on low-wage migrant workers, or increasingly dependent on low-wage migrant workers, says report. Bank of Canada analysis finds share of native-born Canadians in labor force has dropped 10 percentage points, since 2006. 10 percentage points? Wow, that's crazy. Here's a link to the study from the National Post. And so that's not good. See the big red bump at the end here? That's migrant workers, right? Not good. Same thing happening in the UK, as I said. And Endless Mass Migration is sharing Nick's tweet. And Nick says, if you want to know why the UK has no money, then here is one of the reasons: immigration. Let me be perfectly clear. Immigration brings no benefit to us as a nation, only debt, crime, rape, assault, and low trust society. So the government of the UK is paying over £1 billion a month to households with at least one foreign national in them. They're claiming that this is some kind of not a bailout, but here's an injection of cash to help you, and also you just take a migrant and help us out too, right? I scratch your back, you take a migrant. Weird. Reform UK says it's time to put British people first, and Keir Starmer is being lambasted. The Telegraph again. Foreigners claim $1 billion a month in benefits. 8 weeks of payments to households with foreign nationals, enough to wipe out winter fuel cut savings. So we're paying foreign nationals to be in England, while at the same time the winter fuel help for seniors and things like that is being cut. It's an attack. Here's Ryan. He says, our government is out of its mind. Canada took in 817,000 new immigrants in the first 4 months of 2025. That's crazy. The latest federal immigration data shows that Canada welcomed more than 817,000 newcomers in the first 4 months of 25 when tallying up permanent and non-permanent streams. That's almost 1 million people. Rubin says crazy or just corrupt. If your objective is to demographically fracture, destroy the society, and create employment, housing, and a housing crisis that you can use to leverage your UBI, CBDC, and digital ID, then it's not crazy at all. It's just a strategy to win your chess game, to overwhelm the king and win, right? So that's the other thing. And I've said this before, Pierre Poilievre, if Poilievre gets in, or if somebody who's trying to fix things gets in, then you've got the Senate to deal with, then you've got the cracked judiciary to deal with, and then if you get past the Senate and the judiciary, you've got everybody in the media calling you a tyrant for having the audacity. I mean, just look what they do. Look what they did to Higgs. Look what they do to anybody who says men can't be women. If you say that in a political arena, you're done. They'll just remove you, right? And they seem to have the power. So, and if they don't have the power to remove you, they will call you a tyrant until they've turned the public's opinion against you, and then they'll remove you, right? And I wish it weren't so, but like it is so. And so it is not practical to, at this point in time, try and end this in a political way, because like this is a train that goes in one direction at this point in time, and turning it around, near impossible. And again, I wish that wasn't the case, but my gosh, we're in a political situation where I think that is the case. Juno News says the latest federal immigration data shows that Canada welcomed more than 817,000 newcomers in the first 4 months of 25, including all streams. So that's interesting. Table Salt says between March 23 and March 25, Canada added 2.5 million people via immigration, but only 260,000 jobs. It's over. What's over? Because the invasion's not by a long shot. There's capacity. Oh man, there's capacity. People are leaving, right? Got to fill those houses, right? Here's Tristan. He says, 2 things to note about this utterly bananas Canadian immigration chart. It mirrors the big chart at the beginning of this segment that Maxime Bernier was referencing. One, says Tristan, the people in charge saw these numbers and not only didn't crap their pants from shock, but they thought this was fine. 2, the people in charge were just reelected. Our elections are rigged. And I think that it's interesting that this class of political pundit doesn't acknowledge it, talk about it, want to address it at all. Here, this graph, this bump here, to the people in charge represents success. They're not working for us. They're working for the people they're bringing in and the globalists at their behest to bring those people in, to destabilize our society in order to bring about globalist communism here. We're already well on the way. I wish it weren't so. America AF says British patriot breaks down in tears talking about mass immigration. Yep, he sees what's going on and he sees that he can't stop it.
What's going on in our beautiful country? Our beautiful, beautiful country, guys. And we're allowing this to happen. What's wrong with you all?
What do you think?
You don't know what's going to happen in 10 years' time if this carries on. I know what's going to happen, boss, and trust me, I'm scared for my kids and my grandkids. Do you think our grandparents knew what was going to happen on the beaches when they were giving their lives? No. No, they had faith in the king, they had faith in the system, and we have been let down massively. I feel like I'm the only one passionate about my beautiful country. What is wrong with you all, man? Look what's going on in our beautiful country.
Yeah, I feel like that some days, right? But crying with Mark wouldn't be very fun, I promise you. Here's Rapid Response 47, and this is just some common sense stuff that makes perfect sense that the communists in charge of our country would never say because it breaks their narrative. Here we go.
The State Department, under the leadership of Secretary Rubio, is putting in place a system to ensure that anyone who enters this country, but particularly for longer-term immigration benefits, things that have a pathway to a green card or a pathway to citizenship, right, the holy grail of the U.S. immigration system, putting in place a protocol, both in terms of the interview process, the documentary process, the social media process, of making sure that anybody that is admitted to this country, and again, in particular for these longer-term benefits, is somebody that is going to be supportive of our values, of our way of life, that's going to assimilate, that's going to integrate into our national culture, that's going to be financially self-sufficient. Look, you should never have harmful migration, ever. There should never be a case where somebody's coming into this country who has a negative view about America, about the West, about our civilization, isn't going to be able to pay their own way, is going to have a hostile attitude about the way we live in this country. Like, why would any society, why would any civilization that actually wants to preserve itself allow for any migration that is negative to the country as a whole? And so I applaud Secretary Rubio for taking the steps he needs to make sure that America delivers for Americans.
Mostly also Israel. So, man, it's one of those things, right? Somebody sent me, well, I came across something this morning. We'll talk about it later in the show, but man, Secretary Rubio is a snake just like the rest. Sheila says, while you're working, but I appreciate the sentiment here, right? The sentiment is correct. You shouldn't allow people into your country who hate your country. You shouldn't allow people in your country who hate the way you live. You shouldn't allow people in your country who come in here and burn the Canadian flag or the American flag if they're coming into America. I think that is absolutely makes perfect sense. And if our officials are prioritizing people who are doing those things, you have to question the allegiance of the officials. Who do you work for? And that's why I come to the conclusion, globalist communists, because if they worked for us, they wouldn't bring those people who hated us here. They wouldn't. And then they wouldn't prioritize those people for jobs and housing and all the rest. They wouldn't. They would prioritize Canadians. They would help Canadians. They would insist that money is spent on our own programs in our own country, and et cetera, et cetera. So, man, it's just wild. And, it's disappointing that this is even controversial, really. So let's talk about Sheila. And she says, while you're working harder to afford groceries, Ottawa's been busy hiring 99,000 new bureaucrats. That's right, nearly 100,000 more paper pushers since 2016. Canadian Taxpayer Federation crunched the numbers, and it's a feeding frenzy. Let's break it down. The number of federal bureaucrats is up 38% in 10 years. That's 98,986 more employees since Trudeau took office. The federal headcount now sits at 357,956. Per the Treasury Board's data. According to the CTF, the average full-time federal employee now costs you $125,000 a year when you factor in salary, pensions, and perks. That's not just unsustainable, it's outrageous. In 2016-17, the federal bureaucracy cost $40 billion. In 23-24, it's almost $70 billion, $69.5 billion. That's a 72.9% increase, says the CTF. More bureaucrats, more spending, less performance. What are we getting for all that money? The CTF highlights a PBO report showing less than half of government departments meet their own performance targets year over year. The worst offenders in bureaucratic bloat, according to the CTF, Infrastructure Canada, Women and Gender Equality. Oh, I'm so shocked. RCMP review, because it's ambiguous, because you are spending money based on feelings. We feel like this will work. We feel like this is a good initiative. We feel like spending money in this way will yield good results, right? It's a very soft ministry. RCMP review committee, 229%. Yeah, that's just corruption. It's all corruption. Elections Canada, 173%. Refugees Board, 158%. Corruption. Consumer Agency, 154%. Impact Assessment Agency, 127%. Have you ever tried to get anything looked at by any of these agencies that are supposed to be watchdog agencies? Have you ever tried? I've tried. Do you know what happens? That's not my jurisdiction. I'm sorry, you have to go to this watchdog agency. They're very protective of their jurisdiction. And then when you talk to that watchdog agency, nothing happens. They don't care. It takes 6 months for them to call you, and then another 6 months for them to call you back, and then another 6 months for them to say, actually, nothing happened here. We couldn't actually do anything to change anything. Oh, okay. These watchdog agencies are just waste of money. Continuing with Sheila Gunn-Reid. Biggest growth in raw numbers, employment and social development, plus 16,000, almost 17,000 employees. Canada Revenue Agency, 13,000 employees. Canadians struggling to access benefits or dodge audits. Take note, between 2020 and 2023, the feds handed out over 1 million pay raises, $1.5 billion in bonuses. The CTF got these figures through access to information. We're paying top dollar for mediocrity, which means like middling results, not very good results. Meanwhile, the Liberals' 25 platform promises to cap the size of public service. The CTF calls that too little, too late. Capping the bureaucracy just entrenches the hiring spree, says CTF's Franco Tetrazzino. 10, the CTF says if Ottawa had simply matched hiring to population growth, taxpayers would be saving $7 billion a year. Final tally, courtesy of the CTF, 99,000 new bureaucrats, $30 billion a year in added cost. 50% less than 50% meet their performance goals, and no real plan to cut anything. Canadians are working harder to feed a government that works less. Yeah, so I'm not surprised by any of this, but I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed, Canadian government. But they don't work for me, so they don't care. Kirk says the cost of public administration in Canada has skyrocketed. Here's what the total compensation looks like last year, 24 versus 25. So the total cost of public admins went from $92 billion to $148 billion. That's a 62% increase. The federal government admins went from $36 billion to $63 billion. That's a 71% increase. Provincial and territorial admin costs went from $22 billion to $34 billion. That's a 52% increase. Canadian taxpayers are paying an extra $155 million every single day for bloated paper pushers. On the federal side, between this and debt interest costs, Canadians have over $100 billion a year of hard costs without any direct yield to better services. That's a lot of money. And if we stopped all of this tomorrow, like if I came in, magic wand, I'm the prime minister, and I cut all this, I was like, this is all done. We're doing none of this anymore. It would automatically create a depression because the job loss would be massive. Like, it's a lot of money to stop putting into the economy, right? And so no wonder that our economy is and our dollar is being devalued. It's, my gosh, we're in a lot of trouble. Very, very, very problematic economic situation. And Mark Carney hasn't noticed yet, I guess. He doesn't seem to be prioritizing anything to do with any of that. So that's interesting to me. Gosh, we're already at 31 minutes. This is Spencer, and I was talking about him, and he's talking about the rigged election. And I wanted to show you just a couple of the stories from rigged elections that he's got. This is like a 15-minute stream or something like that, maybe more. But he says, are Canadian elections rigged? And my answer is absolutely, Spencer. Yes, they are. Here we go.
Plenty of emails since my first couple videos about the strange happenings in the 2025 Canadian federal election. And thankfully, to viewers and people who have seen the videos I have done, people have reached out. I have verified these claims, so let us get to them. Here's a crazy one from John. Hi, I got a voter information card. I don't have a Canadian citizenship. I still have my Dutch citizenship, and I've been living in Canada for 37 years. So folks who aren't supposed to vote are getting voter cards. How many other instances are there of that? Here's another. Tina, I cast my vote on the 28th of April for Michael Dancy in the region of Peel. I'd like to bring something to your attention. When I got there to vote, my name was already digitally scratched off the list, like someone had cast a vote in my name before I had the chance to do so. Unfortunately, I did not take note of the workers' names. However, the gentleman at the table was perplexed as he asked me if I had already voted, to which I stated no. I'm here to cast my vote. He then called over a supervisor who was also very confused. She motioned to a third person working at the polling station, and they asked her to sign a voucher form providing a signature for identification. And that we all know that says if you do this illegally, you do this knowingly, that you voted twice, that there's a penalty for doing so. It's $50,000 and 5 years in prison. So here's another example of somebody in Canada being told that they had already voted.
So that's really concerning. That is very indicative of rigged election, in my opinion. So I've got to talk about the Donald Trump increase in tariffs. So we'll have to kill a stream somewhere in our grab bag of governance here when it seems to make sense. So until then, we'll carry on. Ryan says, Trump just claimed he was going to increase the tariffs on steel imported into the U.S. by another 25%. Keep those elbows up. Here we go.
Continue to follow this breaking news. U.S. President Donald Trump says he plans to double the tariffs on steel imports from 25% to 50%.
We are going to be imposing a 25% increase. We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America, which will even further secure the steel industry.
And we are working on bringing you a reaction to that, as well as more details.
They're working on bringing you a reaction to that. That will be problematic for the Canadian steel industry. And Table Salt says, we need the world's best crisis negotiator. Mark Carty, we need you. He's on summer vacation, he says. F off. So, yeah, pretty interesting. We'll see how this all plays out. It seems like we're going to be the 51st state because we are refusing to move properly, and or the moves we're making, we're weakening our own position, I think, personally. But man, I've been wrong before. The globalists often have a way of making it look like things are going in one direction and then reverse it right at the last minute, right? Like Pierre Poilievre and his rallies, right? Oh, those are lovely rallies you're having there. And he loses his seat. Right? Does that make it doesn't make a lot of sense. So here's Donald Trump, and everybody said tariffs are going to destroy the economy. The world economy is going to melt down, and the tariffs are going to destroy everything, blah, 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 blah. The instability is a very big problem. Here's Donald Trump playing CNN, the assessment after a month of tariffs. Here we go.
Rick Santelli, this just came out, and we'll just play that for a second.
Personal income is up 0.8%. That is almost triple the expectations. I'll tell you that the income numbers, really, for the first 4 months of the year, they're stellar. They're really stellar. I mean, I could go back and look at the first 4 months of many different years. Really very strong numbers, and you're right. This administration is criticized for just about everything under the sun. I've never, ever in my lifetime had glimpses into the politics of an administration in the form of transparency like this one. Why don't we be, give credit where credit is due? Income really shooting up.
Rick, I also thought everybody was going to get one last order of imports that were going to be tariffed, and they were loading up on things. How the hell they already fix the trade, or not fix it, but to cut it in half? That's crazy. So there wasn't a lot of front loading of things that they needed before the tariffs hit.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it really does call into question some of the conventional wisdoms. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next month when we get this number, or we see some of the other numbers like current accounts, see how they fared. Because I don't know, I've been watching these numbers a long time. I don't think I've ever seen the trade deficit cut in half in 1 month.
Not bad. Right? Not bad.
Come on, guys.
So anybody have questions about the tariffs I'm going to be implementing, says Trump? You guys want to fearmonger? Go ahead. We'll just play that again, right? After a month of tariffs. I've never seen the trade deficit cut in half in a month. Julie says, this is common sense. The fact that we were sold out is so disgusting. Here's Donald Trump saying, hey, Ontario, want to be the 51st state?
All of the manufacturers will build their parts here, too. I mean, it used to bother me. They make a part in Canada, a part in Mexico, a part in Europe, and sent all over the place, and nobody knew what the hell was happening. I think it's ridiculous. You build a car, make it in America, and I gave them a little leeway on that, gave them some leeway, but over the next year, they've got to have the whole thing built in America. That's what we want. We want America to buy American-built cars. Thank you. All of the manufacturers will build their parts.
There you go. He mentions Canada. He says, it's crazy. They go this and that place, Canada, Mexico. And he doesn't want the cars built anywhere but the United States. Very interesting. Here is Sandra, and she's a new MP, I guess. I don't think I've recognized her before. And I think this is the same person. And she says the Prime Minister claimed being the man with the plan. Very well, then where is it? After 14 years in finance, I've learned that if you don't know your numbers, you're out. With economic storm clouds moving in, how is it possible to not produce a budget this spring? I listened to Alex Hormozi. Alex Hormozi he's very rubber meets the road kind of guy, very practical kind of guy. And one of the things he says is, if you don't measure it, then you don't care. If you're not tracking that measurement, then you clearly don't care about it. And so you're going to fail in your business if you don't have good data that you can make good decisions on, basically, right? And that's the same in a government as well. And so if we don't have enough data to even produce a budget, then we're making decisions blind, and we can't possibly make good decisions in that configuration. It's not possible. Here's this, and then we'll have to kill the stream.
The Prime Minister claimed being the man with a plan. Very well. Where is it? After 14 years in finance, I have learned that if you don't know your numbers, you're out. We know the Prime Minister is committed to spending more than Justin Trudeau, but he won't even tell Canadians how much. TD reported that Canada is nearing a 2-quarter recession with up to 100,000 job losses this fall. So I have one simple question. With the economic storm clouds moving in, how is it possible not to have a budget this spring?
The Honourable Minister of Finance and National Revenue.
Speaker, I have one simple answer. We have a plan, and it's a plan in action, Mr. Speaker. I welcome this member to the House of Commons. But the plan, Mr. Speaker, is simple. We're going to cut tax for 22 million Canadians, Mr. Speaker. And in fact, the leader of the Conservatives just said outside the House that he's going to support our plan. So that, Mr. Speaker, is a step forward. Not only we're going to do that, we're going to remove GST for first-time home buyers for a house up to $1 million. And, Mr. Speaker, we're going to remove the consumer carbon price from law, Mr. Speaker. This is a plan. This is delivering for Canadian. This is building a better economy for all.
That's not a budget. So dodging the question, not answering the question, and misrepresenting what's going on. The new member from Sarah, what's her name, is correct. Sarah Corbena. I'm terrible with names. Sorry, Sarah. Garnet Genius says you're going to be seeing a lot of stories like this in the months ahead. And CTV News is reporting students and young people in Ottawa are struggling to land summer jobs. That's all by design. They want the money to go to new Canadians who are new here. For whatever reason, we're not upset about that. And we really, really should be. All right, that's enough out of me on the stream, everybody. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful